All right, so thank you so much for joining us. We're here with Sally Stewart. She is our exhibitor for her show, My Life and My Art, a very natural and comfortable clutter. So Sally, we have a few questions here for you, but I just wanted to start off by asking what art means to you.
You know, to me, it's an invisible thing. It's art with a capital A-R-T, and it's huge. And it's something that has existed since people have existed. And today, when I sit here and look at my show, this is my art, but it's only a small part of it. Along with this, a friend and I had lunch the other day, and she said to me, "Do you think all people are artists?" And I think they can be. And I think sometimes they're afraid that they wouldn't measure up and people wouldn't like what they say, so they hesitate. But I would like to see, sometimes I've thought about Jonah, one of my pieces, and I thought, what if we were all in a class, a bunch of people, and the teacher said, "Okay, now I want you all to tell the story of Jonah. How would you do it?" And I can see art as being so inclusive with all kinds of art. And I'm sitting in a facility that celebrates this all the time. They have so many different activities. And if you go through a year, you would see some that appeal to one kind of person and experience and so on. So to me, art is huge. I think anybody's welcome in my art world. And I had an experience with a young man who had come to me after a hospital experience, and he was doing home nursing. We met in my one room full of art, and he never said anything until the last day. And he stood up, and he turned his back to me, and he was thinking, and he said, "You know, when I go to an art place, an exhibit, people tell me I like the wrong thing." And I felt so much sadness for him, and I said, we are allowed to feel and think whatever is natural for us. And I don't want anyone to be afraid of it. I want everybody to be eager to jump into the art world.
Absolutely. And, while we're on this topic of, what you think art is, I know you mentioned earlier that you thought art is like a silent conversation. I thought that was so beautiful, and it just rang so true with really all kinds of art, looking at it. But if you could just explain that a little bit more, just because, like I said, that is probably the most perfect thing I have heard with regards to art.
When I read that, I thought, oh my gosh. So many times artists create art and it doesn't go anywhere. They put it in a closet or they keep it. I think you need a conversation with it. And I think that the artist begins a conversation by creating something. Another person continues the conversation by commenting on it, maybe only in their mind. Maybe that's where it's silent. And if you go to museums along with thousands of other people, you are conversing with the artist through your thoughts. I might think, oh, I wish I had a lot of money. I'd buy that piece, take it home and see it every day. Or you might think, I'm glad I didn't have an axe with me. I would chop it up in pieces. It's not very good. Or I might just walk past it with a little glance. But we all converse with art because we see it all the time. A lot of people don't know what art really is.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say that art is, other than a silent conversation then?
Art is everything we see and do every day almost. Mm-hmm. Someone had to design the shoes we're wearing, mm-hmm. the jewelry, the house we live in, the park. Everything we eat is in a container that's been designed and for the salesmanship of it. Art is everything, and yet a lot of people see it as an isolated little thing of pictures on the wall.
And kind of going back to, people maybe not knowing that their whole world is art. We kind of learned that during COVID, that whenever we were stuck inside, that all things, we were trying to entertain ourselves. And while doing that, we were entertaining ourselves with art. We were consuming so much media, the media today, videos, YouTube, television, that's art, that's film. Same with like reading. Literature is an art form. There were just so many things that were art related that nobody had really thought of, like you said, like in our everyday lives. We're just consuming art constantly, so it doesn't necessarily have to be in an exhibit. Like you said, some people think that they're going into an exhibit and not liking the right things. You don't always have, if you're not comfortable going in there yet, we would like to make people comfortable in a space like this, but you can consume art every day in your everyday life. So I think that's really important to understand. And just kind of going back to the COVID thing, I know you have a few paintings over there that have to do with COVID. So right over here, we have your self-portrait with your mixed media there, and your home sweet home up there with all of the distractions of our everyday life, all of these things that were happening, COVID, the wars in Ukraine, all of the things that we've been going through in everyday life. I don't know if you want to explain those a little bit.
I'd like to talk about the COVID a minute, because
Absolutely.
one of the most difficult things for me as an artist is to take a feeling and which has no, you can't see it, and express it in a way that other people can understand what I'm talking about. When I did the COVID, I was by myself for 3 months with nobody else in my house. And to be able to deal with the idea of isolation, separation, and I thought about, there's some kind of a barrier. It's invisible, but it's keeping us from doing what we always did. We always wanted to be with others. What does this barrier look like? And I had to invent a kind of a netting that, to me, I could see out of it, but I couldn't get out of it. And so we invent things, symbols, and ways to speak to others when words don't work. And for me, art is my second language. And a lot of times, just as the COVID, I think I can speak more about it through images and the large conglomeration of stuff that deals with 3 different global problems: the war, the COVID, and the refugees. I can take other objects and put them all together, and I think I can invite people to be pulled into it and to say what they think about it and what it means to them.
Absolutely. So I heard you talking about, these barriers during COVID. And of course, we all have barriers in our everyday lives as well, not pertaining to COVID even. So did you have, while you were trying to establish yourself as an artist, were there barriers for you when you first started? I know you have a story about the first time you even started wood carving in school.
Yeah.
To me, in my opinion, that felt like kind of a barrier, being the times and what women were supposed to be doing.
That's exactly one of the things. When I was young, there were barriers at home because my father was a Depression dad who went to work not knowing what he would earn that day. And he was very practical because he had to feed a family. He told me I should study something where I would have a good living. I said, I want to study something I would like. And so we had a discussion about art as being maybe not earning. And I had to decide early on, and I did, that art was going to be, for me, something I enjoyed rather than something as my career to earn money, because I couldn't see it that way. So that was a barrier. Another barrier was just not having money. And so I taught myself to do lettering, and I lettered a lot of things to earn money for insurance or for books, tuition and so on. And I actually did school bus lettering and painting for Little League fields. That was kind of a barrier, just not having the money. When I started wood carving, I did it because I was curious about it. I liked the way carving was done on furniture and things, and I thought, that looks impossible, I'm going to try it. I didn't have any tools. I just took a piece of wood from my father's workshop, drew a picture on it, and thought, I'm going to try to coax that image out of the wood. Looked around for some sharp tools. My father took a screwdriver to his grinding wheel and made my first chisel. And so the challenge there was I was teaching myself and learning on the job. And then, this was in the early 70s, when boys went to shops and girls went to home ec. And I was kind of a curiosity. I can't say it was ever a barrier, but I was a curiosity, and two things stand out. One was a show. I was invited by the Southern Alleghenies to show woodworking, and mine was the only carving. The others were built pieces. I was the only woman in a group of 8 other artists.
Oh, wow.
And the wood carving group in town here, the Wood Carving Club, was going to have an exhibit at a local mall, and they said to me, this was after I had been doing it for a while and was considered getting to be rather good. We'd like you as a woman to show your work because we think that would draw people to our exhibit.
Ah, okay. Wow.
And I don't know, there's probably other barriers. I think the barrier of time is also always difficult for people who have a job and work. But this thing of having art with my job, which was teaching art to kids, it was a dual kind of blessing because they fed me. I learned from them several things, but they also learned a little bit of art, I hope, from me. But I could do my art. I was learning to be an artist at the same time as learning to be a teacher. And the two of them worked out perfectly together.
That's great.
So it wasn't too much of a barrier. Just time, finding energy after a day's work to get into my art, and then leaving a piece half finished when I had to come back to it again.
Yeah, no, that's one of my biggest things is I always want to see the finished product, and I get my biggest kind of ideas at night, so then I start them and then I'm like, oh, I gotta go to bed, and then you have to go back to it. But a lot of times that works out in my favor because you wake up with basically a new pair of eyes. You know, working on it all day, you start losing, at least for me, the bigger picture of it all, and you're so just focused on that one thing, and then you come back the next day and it's like a brand new thing.
That's one of the problems too when you start an ambitious thing like the door on this.
And for those of you who don't know, Sally did our the front door of the Gold Haberfen Fine Arts Building, so you can come see that anytime. It's literally the very front door. Yep, absolutely. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, anyway, when the man brought the door to my studio, he said, "Where do you want this?" I said, "Put it on my work table." It covered the whole table. So when I was carving it, I couldn't move it very well. It was very heavy. I had to do most of the carving sitting on it.
Oh, wow.
And that was a barrier. How do you get back and say, is this okay?
Yeah.
Step back and look at it. The size of it was a little bit intimidating. And also, when I've done 3 things that took around a year. One was altar carvings for my church. And the other one was a sculpture, which I did after 9/11. It finished a week before the first anniversary of that event, the terrorist attack, and the door. And how do you maintain the same feeling for a year that you had when you started?
Exactly.
That's what
Yeah.
you were saying.
So would you say then those pieces that you worked about a year on, or what did you say, a year
Around a year or less.
less? Yeah. So would you say those were your hardest pieces to work on then, just purely because of the time that went into them?
They were some of them, yeah. I did a showing of works about our city in 1989. We were celebrating our recovery from the 1889 flood, and we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of that.
Wow.
And I got in my car and drove through neighborhoods. I looked at my city from above it, as high up as I could get. I looked at it in different seasons. I looked at it through the eyes of maybe some of the workers, the people who live there. And that took a lot of research. So research to me in some things that I'm not really acquainted with is a barrier. And I think you have to be very careful about that. The steel mills, I was able to walk behind them when they were closed and look down on them and so on. I think research is one of the barriers that you just live with it, and I came to enjoy it, really. Research, I like it.
And I know, kind of going back to the beginning of this question, with art being a barrier, I know that you said money was one of the barriers, and that probably still holds true today, if not more than ever. So one of my biggest things that I always tell anyone who comes in here is that you don't necessarily need the best tools, the best, anything to create your art. As long as you have it, you can create something. I think for me, art is just the actual act of creating something, whether or not you're using, $100 pencils or $1 pencils, $1 paintbrushes.
And I think a lot of people, I had a friend that we used to paint together, and she'd say, I get so mad at you. I take such good care of my things and keep the boxes clean and things, and yours is a mess, and your art is better than mine. But, and I used to take my work to get framed sometimes, and the framer would say, why don't you use better paper? This is crumbling on the edge and so on. And I thought, well, you could draw on a tablecloth. You can draw anywhere. If an idea really needs to be expressed,
Yes.
get it out. Yeah, and I think a lot of people think it's too costly. They need the best. I never had the best. I always had what I could afford, and it was fine.
Yeah.
I never had carving tools for a couple of years after I started.
Wow.
And it's interesting, the first box was, I think, 4 or 5 chisels, $10.
Wow.
And now a single carving tool costs a lot more.
Yeah, I bet.
I think you have to get over that idea and think that you can do art on almost anything.
Absolutely. And like you said, if you have that drive, like where something is just begging to come out, you would put it on anything, an artist, I feel like, can look at anything and create with it. I know that's what you said you did with a few of these over here, with Jonah and the whale, that you just kind of looked at these pieces of wood and saw what could come out of them, especially with that bigger piece with the fin and the eye and the mouth.
Right.
Yep.
2 different ways of starting. People have often asked me, how do you know how to start something? How did you know how Jonah was going to look? Well, one way is intellectually. You study it, you read the book, you make sketches, and you approach it that way. The other way is that I had bought a piece of walnut wood that looked interesting to me, and I knew I'd use it, but not what I'd use it for. And so when I looked at it finally, it said I'm a fish, because it had some markings in it that were the right place, like a fin, the eye, the mouth. And I think a lot of times I like to start with the material itself. You know, whether it's a piece of paper, there's a good challenge with a piece of good, clean white paper and a pencil. And all your energy and thoughts go into that pencil, down into that point, and you can, with very little expense, do a pencil drawing.
Absolutely.
You know, or you can find some used wood and sand it off a little bit and do your own piece with it, so.
Yeah, and speaking of like drawings where you could just put anything to paper, we do have actually one of my favorite pieces from your exhibit here, prayer. And this one, whenever you said you'd really just put the pencil to paper, I know this is pen, but same kind of premise. I mean, you put the pen to paper and created something beautiful. I don't know if you want to take that and just show it real quick. Like I said, this is one of my absolute favorite pieces.
This is one that almost looks like you never raised the pen from when you started. And it was a strong feeling I had about somebody kneeling in prayer and how intense they are. And even down where the hands are, they're folded, but you can't see them very well. But this was done almost is in one line. And yet I felt so strong about it that I think that it worked.
Absolutely.
And so I would ask sometimes, is a small piece of art that takes a few minutes, is it as relevant and valuable as one that might take almost a year? I would ask people that and see what they had to say about it.
Yeah. Thank you. So kind of just going back to the beginning of this question, I just had one more thing that I wanted to add to it. How you said that your father wanted to make sure that you had stability financially and in your whole working career. That was one of the things that was kind of put into me. I was always an art person, performing arts, music, visual arts, all of it. And I always wanted to be an artist. And my parents, they love me so much and they just wanted what was best. They kept saying, you're great at art, but you know, you need something that will support you. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there are so many different parts to the art world. Especially my job now, I didn't think that this was even something that was a thing, you know, being kind of doing behind the scenes work, but at the same time being able to immerse myself in art. Like I am surrounded by it every day. And I think that's something really important for the younger generation to understand, is that art, you can go so many different paths with it, not just being the artist, but being the person that is the bridge between, the bridge between the artist and the people viewing it. You know, it's been my dream just to make our community, Johnstown, a place full of art. And I think that's what we're accomplishing here. And it's so important that people know that these jobs exist.
We talked about, is everybody an artist?
Yeah.
Well, the art field, some of the people I respect the most are those who help promote art, help raise money, and when I had shows, I always saw some of these folks coming, but they were the ones who raised the money to make this facility possible, as well as others in town, and to make sure that the artists had a place to put the art. And I think the people who encourage artists, the people who attend the shows, they're all part of the art world. The world is so big, as you were saying. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. All right. So let's see here. I have a question here on on our Facebook that kind of pertains to what we were talking about before with different mediums. So this question is from Janice. So she says, Sally, what is your favorite medium to work with? And has that changed over the years?
When I chose the college to attend, I chose one that was the cheapest, and that happened to be a teacher's college. And I wasn't thrilled about teaching, but I knew I need to make a living. So I went to Indiana and I learned there a whole lot of media. I learned a lot. Here's some ways you can draw with some of these materials. Here's a way you can do sculpture. Here's a way you can do paintings. I fell in love with so many. I'm not sure I have a favorite. I know that for people coming to my shows, the wood pieces are among the favorites. But some of the ones I did caught something about them. This piece right here was a scene. I used to visit a friend of mine who was the wife of a farmer. She lived on a farm. She did little portraits of her family. I had to walk past from the barn where I parked to her home, and I walked past this old lilac bush. And I did a drawing of it, and I thought, well, someday I'm going to kick it. It's loose. I'm going to take that piece of wood home and use it. But in the meantime, I did this little drawing, and it's one of my favorites. I don't know why.
It's
but
beautiful.
It's one of my favorites, and it's a mixed media with painting, watercolor, and pencil. And I think it worked very, very well for me. So I think a lot of these are favorites. I like Noah with his animals. I think that was fun to do. It was one that wasn't very serious, and I didn't have to worry about how the animals looked. So it was a fun piece to do. I do like the wood, and the wood is the most labor intensive, and it's hard on my hands. My hands are now not as good as they can. I think that's from using my hands as tools. But the wood is made from something natural, and it's so appealing to everybody. A piece of wood is so appealing. And I think the pieces that I've made out of wood are some of my favorites.
Nice. So I have another question here. We're going to kind of get back to the questions we had. But so we kind of just talked about, like, you know, the pieces that have either like a favorite piece or the most significance. Is there any one particular in this exhibit that you would say, this one sticks out the most to me? This one I had such an attachment to while creating it.
Right, okay, so the oldest piece in this exhibit, because this whole, when I saw all this work hung, I thought, this is my life right here. The oldest one is the little drawing in crayon of the collie dog from 3rd grade. So that, at the time, it was very significant because I didn't have art materials. I had a box of crayons and paper, and I had hours and hours of joy out of that. So that's significant. The last one that I did with the Ukraine, the COVID, and the refugees is one that I feel is very significant. I could have included many other global issues, but the last few years, and I think part of it's being separated during COVID, and part of it when I was thinking about the Ukrainian war was, I think there's been more wars than we could ever remember all through time, and the results are the same. I had read that there were, I forget how many thousand orphans created from this war. And I thought of the Madonna and child image, and here now we have all these single women again, their husbands were killed. These issues, the last couple of years, how people have had their lives stolen from them and are not in control, are some of my most, the ones I like. Also, there's a crossover here that's made out of cactus wood. Now, I did not know that cactus turned to wood materials, and when my niece or my nephew from Arizona sent me a box of woods that he picked up from the desert floor, here was some of this saguaro cactus, And so that's significant to me that I learned that and that I could include it in a cross entirely of that. I also used it in my, this piece with the war. I used it in the arms reaching up. But when I discovered new materials, or the fact that I could mix them like water and watercolor and something, or I could stick a 3D thing on a drawing, I think those are significant for me because I learned the whole way through. And I never felt too hung up on doing things as a purist would do. Now, I have friends who are artists who do one thing, and they do it using the same materials. And I respect them, and they're good at it. But I always thought my attitude of what if I did this was something that kept me going. And it gave significance to a lot of the pieces that maybe I'm using an ordinary idea, but I'm doing it differently. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So one thing that I just thought was great was that your family, then they send you wood. So do you get wood? Like, do people just know Sally, give her all of our scraps, all the wood that we could find?
Stories. I have friends who are a couple at my church, and they go to the beach often. They always come back with a bag of wood they picked up. The other thing was when I went to the Bahamas, I found some driftwood. And that fascinates me because I have no idea where it came from or how old it is or anything. And I have a friend whose family used to go to an island off of Greece. And she said, I walked past this piece of olive wood every day in a little garden area. And she says, finally, I said, I just grabbed it and stuck it in my coat or my pants pocket and said, Sally will make something out of this. And so, yeah, I love to find wood that I can't identify.
Yeah.
And almost always when I do a cross, if it's a group of them, someone wants to choose one, they choose one with a natural piece of wood just picked up from the ground. And I've used old wood and wondered whether that was going to last through the years. This chicken is one with a whole lot of woods from all over the place in the world.
I don't know if you wanted to like show the chicken.
Well, it's just a little idea. It's sort of comical. And there's one out in the hall going up the steps with sneakers on. And
yes.
So, to take an ordinary idea and just carry it a little further. I had an art show here several years ago, and at the opening, a woman said to me, you see things I don't see. Now, she said, I see them because I can see through your work. So,
absolutely.
So but I love to use stuff that people would think is no good.
The loving the unloved things, basically. Yes.
That's exactly right.
That's kind of my motto. Like if I see something, I just got a dog recently and she's blind in one eye. She has a little alopecia on her tail. She's got arthritis in her back legs and she's 12 years old. And I just looked at her and I said, I need to give you all of my love because who else would, Exactly and she had been sitting there for a while and something in me just gravitates to something that needs all the love that they can get.
And
so
isn't that a challenge to an artist to take something that most people would think is ugly and make it into something that they actually want to choose it first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think isn't that why people go to flea markets to find some unloved piece that they can give it love too. Yeah. And you see artists who do sculptures out of pop bubbles and junk, that stuff we consider litter and stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it was really great when you said that your family was finding wood on, what was it, on the beach, or your friends were finding wood on the beach. And that kind of goes back to what we were saying about art being in everyday life. Exactly. They probably thought, oh, Sally would like this. Little did they know they're part of the process of your art. Absolutely. That they're looking at that and they go, that could be art, whether they know that they're thinking that or not. It just, it happens so fast that some people don't even realize it.
And there is a place for everybody. And when
Absolutely.
you think about, if I hold up a piece of wood that I had to work with, and I think about the process of that becoming a piece of wood for me here, where it started maybe in the rainforest of South America, and someone had to know enough about it to identify a tree, and then all of the labor that it took to get to my place. I mean, everybody is included
Absolutely.
in it, yeah.
And I think that's beautiful too, just kind of in the world we're living now where it's so divided. I feel like that bringing like something as simple as, giving you wood from a different place just kind of connects us all. Like you said, if it's from somewhere in a rainforest and now it's here, kind of connecting these different parts of the world back to this one place. And it's very, I think it's a humbling experience too, probably,
Well,
just to,
yeah. And we're united to everyone now in the world instantly by the media. Yeah, and when I was invited to make crosses for my national church's bishop to give us gifts, I purposely chose wood from all over the world because some of that actually went back to the place I got the wood from.
wow.
And it united, as you said.
Yeah.
It united everybody. Our world's getting bigger.
It is.
And it's getting, the boundaries are disappearing, and, young people are traveling more, and it's for them, their world, where ours might have been a farmyard, like for me when I was little. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to the questions here. What would you say to aspiring artists?
Don't give up. You have a right to be part of the art world, but you have to make decisions like I did. You must support yourself. You have more opportunities than I had because you know about more things to do. And you have to be patient with not maybe having financial means for a while. And don't be afraid to be who you are. You are not like anyone else. And you may have invented or discovered something that's going to be putting you up in lights and so on. But you have to do what you love. I think is important to do it.
Absolutely.
Because I have never stopped loving art
Yeah.
and creating it. I would say stick to your guns, but make sure you have a means for your support. And that frees you up to give to your art what you want it to be, even if it's not bringing in the money at the time.
And I think what you said about us, like this generation, having so many more resources, that is very important to understand that, yes, we do have those resources, but we still have to work for the things that we want, because I think nowadays we're so used to instant gratification because of all the resources we have. You can go on to YouTube and figure out how do I start wood carving, or how do I, use this paint correctly. And I think a lot of times then that's when they do give up, is whenever they're like, we have these resources, instant gratification. Why isn't it working for me? You still have to work at your art, I mean, you've been working, this whole exhibit is your life, you've made it your life.
It's probably about 85 years.
Absolutely. And you're still working at it. And that's what I think this generation definitely needs to look at.
And it goes back to your own life, because we had to work so hard for everything we had. And it gave us experiences, and it introduced us to other people. And I think my life without art was very rich. And I think one of the biggest blessings was all the people who came into my life. And I just wonder sometimes, and maybe it's because I'm old and the people are young, But I wonder sometimes whether they have enough experience to to speak about some of
Yes.
these things. So I think it's important to get experiences. Don't be afraid to ask yourself, what if? What if you try this? What
Yep.
if you do this? And not expect it's going to make you rich.
Yeah, you do it for the love of it,
Yeah.
and absolutely. So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to add about the exhibit, about your life, about your work in general? Anything that you would like to say? There's the camera right here. We have a few people watching here, even speaking to the audience, anything like that.
I would say that, art to you, a lot of you, is free. I mean, you can be part of this big art world without really investing much of yourself. Don't be afraid of a new idea. I asked my friend, and we were having lunch, I said, why do you think an artist creates? And she said, or I said, who do they create for? And she said, themselves. Now, don't be afraid to use art as a connection to other people. And don't be afraid to give away some of your work. I have people who have passed some of my work on 3 generations now.
Wow.
And I have some who have acquired my work over the years, and when they passed away, their kids wanted all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So think about your legacy. Think about down the road a little bit. Everything isn't about instant. Think about where some of this might end up and whose lives they might touch.
Absolutely.
In the process, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's the end of my questions here. I just wanted to say one quick thing, actually a couple things. Sally's exhibit will be on display until April 28th. So you have until then to view this beautiful, beautiful exhibit. We are also holding an in-person coffee and conversation. So something like you saw today, but it's going to be in person. Sally will be here on Saturday, April 15th. From 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock to have conversations with everyone. We'll have coffee here, we'll have treats. And we also have, while you come by, we have these beautiful postcards that Sally has so generously brought in for us to sell. So if you want to grab any of those, we have a few of them here. A lot of the items in the exhibit are for sale as well. Even just to come in and view them, it's a great experience. So that is the Coffee and Conversations, the in-person experience on Saturday, April 15th. Sally, thank you so much for joining me today and, speaking to the audience. I think it's really great to have somebody who is so immersed in the art world and so, I guess, decorated. You have, like you said, you have all your stuff all over the world, basically. So it's a privilege to get to speak with you and have you doing your exhibit here at the Art Center. So again, thank you so much. And please join us on Saturday.
Thank you very much.